Hello again, Mountaineers. This is Craig with Career Services at Western Colorado University, and we are back with part two of our discussion about building your resume from scratch. Here in part two, we're going to start, as you can see over here, with the outline document that we have created in part one. And we are now going to start working on some of the basics of formatting into something that we would recognize as a resume. So let's just jump right in. So you can start here with a blank document and just copy and paste your content in as you wish. But we're just going to start, for the purposes today of developing this resume, we're just going to start with the document that we actually created in part one. And so this is what we made in part one. I did add back a little information about a second job just to give us a little bit of additional content. But if you've only got one job in your work history, don't worry too much about that. We have lots of other tools that we can always talk about to kind of help you fill that page out if you don't have some work experience. So first of all, beginning with our draft, I'm going to be using Microsoft Word here. The fact of the matter is it's just kind of the most powerful word processing tool, and it's pretty familiar to most people. So it's fairly easy to learn some new tricks and tips to building your format here in the document. Do avoid, as a general rule, avoid pages, for example, if you're an Apple user, or more obscure word processing programs, just because they may not be as accessible to folks. So for example, in my office here on campus, I work on a PC and just can't open Pages documents. So start with Microsoft Word or with Google Docs. Google Docs doesn't have quite the robust feature set of Microsoft Word, but it really has plenty of options, all the options you're going to need for building this resume. Number two is set basic margins here. 1 inch is pretty standard, and I'm guessing is probably the preset setting in your Microsoft Word program. So start with 1 inch. We can adjust this a little bit later on if we needed, but just make sure that you're at straight 1 inch margins all around. And we're going to start with just a standard font. On my computer, the default is Calibri as the font and an 11 font size. Again, we're going to change some of this as we build the resume out, but we don't need to worry too much about these details yet until we start putting some things in order. I do want to make a quick note about fonts here. Stick with the standard fonts: Times New Roman, Arial, Calibri, Tahoma. There are some others that pretty much are loaded on every computer in the English-speaking world, at least. And so it's going to make them really accessible and easy to read on other computers as a general rule. So don't get too fancy with your font here. Just keep to the basics, keep to the common ones. And finally, I guess as this two-part video series would imply, is we want to just generally avoid templates and wizards. Number one is it's going to look like a template, or it's going to look like it was built in a wizard. And that's just going to mean that it's going to look like a bunch of other resumes out there. We want your resume, in a sense, to stand out. Even though what I'm suggesting is very simple formatting, it's going to be noticeably different in the sense that you did it yourself, that you built the document yourself, and purposefully used kind of simple formatting to highlight the things that you wanted to highlight and to make your document readable. So let's avoid templates and wizards. If you've already got a resume built in a template or a wizard, you can just copy and paste that text as plain text into a new document. That could be your starting place. So first, we're going to look at the heading up here. And the first note here: create your header in the main body area, not in the header area. So we call it a heading or a header, but note that when you're in Microsoft Word, we can actually click up here and you can see that we have a separate header and also a footer area. Now, in general, we don't want to use these header and footer areas, and that's primarily because these days you're probably going to be applying to jobs online, oftentimes through automated systems called applicant tracking systems. And these things may have a hard time reading content that's up here in this header section, just because of the way that it's coded on the back end of Word or of Google Docs. So let's keep everything right here in this main body area. When we click back out of here, we just want to keep everything in this main section. Now, we talked about what goes in the header, so I don't think we need to reiterate this too much, but decide if you want to include, for example, your location or your street address. As I mentioned in the previous video, you don't have to include an address. I am going to choose to include city and state just to give some regional context to a person that is reading this about where I currently reside. And then we talked about your email address and your phone number. Make sure these are addresses that are professional, especially your email address, and a phone number that you actually check. So again, reiterating here, this is probably going to be a cell phone number for most people. This needs to be a number that you plan on checking, that you plan on picking up when people call, and also that you plan to have space available for somebody, a potential employer, to leave you a voicemail so that you can know who it is that contacted you and get back to them. Now, a couple notes here. One is we don't need to call this a heading. That's obviously what it is going to be, but we don't need to call it that. So we can just delete that word heading up there and make our name big and bold. Now, we want our name to be the biggest and the boldest thing on the page. So I'm just going to somewhat arbitrarily pick a size 18, let's say. And I'm also going to make this bold so that my name just stands out a little bit more. Now, a couple of the notes here, now we can do some formatting just to start to make this look a little nicer and organized. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of this hyperlink in the email address. The reason is that when Word automatically creates links to URLs and email addresses, is as you can see, we can do this again, it's going to turn it blue and underline it. Well, this is going to make your email address the only text on the page that is blue, and possibly the only text on the page that's underlined. And that's just distracting. We don't need to do that. So you've got two options here. We can right click and simply remove the hyperlink, and that's just going to put it back to standard formatting. Or if we create this link again, or the other alternative is that we can also just reformat this text. All that this is doing when it creates a hyperlink, besides being clickable, is it's making it underlined and it's making it blue. So we should be able to simply click the underline button here, gets rid of the underline. And then we can come back to the text color and make it called automatic, or just set it back to black. And now you've got black text again that looks like everything else. Now, one advantage of simply reformatting this is that, as you can see, this is still a clickable link. And even if I export this to a PDF format, your email address will actually be clickable if the person is reading your resume online or on their computer screen. But it'll still look like all the other text. So you can see if we just, in this case, hold Control and click that it pops open an email window. So you may wish to just reformat this. Now you can see I've clicked on it. It has changed this back here. So we can undo some of that if we want. And then we've still got our phone number here. Now I'm going to just, for starters, I'm just going to center this just to put it in the middle of the page. And I also think this seems to be, we're burning a lot of space over here, a lot of page by listing all of this information on separate lines. So I think that what I am going to do is reorganize this a bit. And I think I'm going to bring phone number up here. We'll separate this with just a space and a vertical pipe here. And then do the same on this end. Vertical pipe. And this is now, save this a couple of lines of text, and you can see everything still fits plenty nicely in terms of the width of the page. So I think while I'm at this, I'm also just going to turn everything into 12 size font while we're here. Again, we can continue to play with all this font size and everything as we move forward. So just kind of see what's going to start to help fill up the page and look nice on your page. Now, our education section. So now we can bring this up. We have some extra space in here. And then now we're going to get into our education. Well, now we've got a header. This header that I've already bolded in the previous video, this is going to delineate visually very quickly for a reader of our resume what kind of information is in this section so that they can find the sections that they really want to read first. So one thing I definitely want to do is make our headings a little bit bigger. Ooh, and we are jumping ahead, by the way. So now we're on to education section here first. And I do note here, generally for most college students, your education is going to be the first real section of your resume after your header information. And that's just because that's what a lot of folks are looking for. I mean, when they're hiring interns, kind of one of the first things they might need to know is what are you studying and what year in school are you, for example. Education can go elsewhere. It could go at the bottom of the page, but I think for just building your first resume at this point, let's just leave education up here at the top. Now, we've already talked again about what do we include, name of institution, location, major, et cetera. We've included all of that stuff here. And we did in the last video, we did put in both high school information and our current college information. Now, high school information really isn't required. And in fact, most of you will likely, even if you're including high school information right now, you likely will be deleting that before very long at all, because now that you're in college, your primary educational sort of background is going to be your post-secondary credential, the one that you are working on now. Now, if you are a very recent high school graduate, a first year, second year student here at Western, you might want to leave your high school diploma. It just, if nothing else, it just gives you some content to help you fill the page for right now. So for our purposes today, I'm going to go ahead and leave high school in here, as well as our university experience. The last bullet here lists all education in reverse chronological order. And this is a standard formatting piece of any resume. I shouldn't say any. There are other ways to format, but the most common way that we format is just called the simple reverse chronological format, meaning that you're going to put your most recent or your current pursuits, your work pursuits or your education pursuits at the top of the page, and then work backward as you move down the page. So let's first of all pop our Western experience right up top, because that's what we're currently working on. And in this case, I am building this resume as if I'm graduating in May 2022. And now, again, we want to start to put some of this information just a little bit into some kind of a logical order. Number one is making sure that we're listing things in more or less the same direction as we move through each of these little sections here. So the name of the school first up at the top, right? Western Colorado and Collegiate Academy. Location second, Gunnison, Colorado, Littleton, Colorado, and so on and so forth. Now I can see that we can pop this up here and move this down a line. And now we have got things more or less in the same order. You can see we added some extra information in college here, and that's totally fine. Let's also now, we want to start to think about readability just a little bit as we're building this. So, I think that the name of the institution, I think I'm also going to want to bold to help it stand out. So we're going to highlight these, bold these. And this header name, again, is still pretty small. It kind of sinks in. It looks the same sort of type of a heading as we have the university name here. And we want this to stand out as a heading. So it's distinctive as a heading, which means we probably want to make this bigger. So maybe let's take this up to a 14 or a 16, perhaps. And again, we can leave it on the left. We can center it again. You get to start making a bunch of these little decisions for yourself just based on what you think looks good. But we're going to make this a size 16 font and put it in the center. And then we're going to get down into our actual educational experience. And now we've got all the basic information here: the school name, the location, graduation date, and then in the case of university, what we're studying. And in the case of high school, this was just a little plug. Well, in college up here, just some plugs about other experiences or honors or awards that hypothetical Craig Beebe might have experienced in his time at these institutions. As we move forward to work experience, very much the same thing here, right? So we've already typed all of this basic information in the previous video. We want to start thinking too about starting to focus these bullets to provide 2 to 4 strong bullets about each position. And then we talked about focusing your bullets on accomplishments and accolades rather than simply summarizing whatever your job description was. And so we can start doing that. Again, we want to start matching this format. So this heading up here, this section heading is in 16 type and is in center justified. So we're going to want to do the same thing here, 16 and center justified. You can see that we highlighted the university name here. So again, for consistency, we're going to want to do the same here. Let's highlight McDonald's or bold McDonald's and REI. Now, at a quick glance, as a basic resume, we've got it. This is an acceptable resume, certainly early in college for something that you might be using to apply for on-campus jobs, work-study jobs, for something you might be using to apply off-campus to serving jobs, things like this. So we don't need necessarily to go a lot more in depth than this very basic format, though we certainly can. And you yourself might even see already some options that you can think of that would just make this look a little bit nicer. Do keep in mind that besides our bullets, now we kind of focused these bullets a little bit, or attempted to focus these bullets a little bit in the previous video. At this point, we're trying to get down to 2 to 4 bullets. We don't want a big list of 7, 8, 10, 12 bullets about each job. We want to really focus these on the best pieces of information. So go with 2 to 4 bullets. This is going to make it so it's not too overwhelming. It's not too many words on the page that the person has to, think about reading. We want to keep it nice and simple. We also want to put this section in reverse chronological order. Now, this is going to be a theme, although we don't really go into other sections of what you could put in a resume at this point. But this is going to go basically for every section of your resume. You always want to work from the most recent or current experience and then work backward from there. Now, though we're not going to go in depth, these are other sections that you might consider adding, right? Volunteer experience or community engagement. If you volunteer every week at the animal shelter, or whatever the case might be, you do fundraising for local nonprofit organizations, you might want to add a whole section and primarily following the same type of a format, the same basic information about each position, and add a section for that. If you have certifications, this could be as simple as just Red Cross first aid and CPR. In many fields, certainly in certain aspects of business and computer science or engineering and recreation and outdoor education, many of these fields are going to have you pick up additional certifications along the way, whether that's certifications in specific coding languages or wilderness first responder, or whatever those certifications might be. So we can also have a whole section. If you've got a couple of certifications you want to brag about, we can add a whole section just for certifications. Projects or research experience. Research might be a little bit more of an obvious one. I mean, if you're working on formal research projects, like funded research projects with faculty members, that's a great thing to include on your resume. But also you might think about even just projects. These could be projects that you work on through nonprofits, through a student organization. And maybe these projects aren't necessarily research or anything particularly academic, but maybe they're fundraising projects. Maybe they're projects to develop online marketing or social media marketing, just to get the word out and educate the public about what these groups do. Think about if you have projects like this that might be relevant and worth including on your resume. And then finally, skills. Now, skills is one that we often see, that I often see. The list of skills that might come on your resume or that you might put on your resume might be things like effective communicator and strong leadership ability and things like this. I'm going to encourage you, if you do want to list a skills section, and we can certainly talk through this, is to list more tangible skills, more direct, sort of hard skills, if you will, as opposed to soft skills. The problem with soft skills is that it's just hard for an employer. When you say effective communicator, as an employer reading your resume, and I've never met you, I'm not sure what that's really supposed to mean. Does that mean that you have experience in public speaking? Does it mean that you have any particular experience in technical writing or in research writing or academic writing? It's hard to know what you mean by that kind of by effective communication. So focus on hard skills. Again, this could be coding languages or certifications you get just around software that you might use regularly. This could be foreign languages. If you're multilingual, bilingual, certainly including those language skills on your resume is highly recommended. I mean, multilingual candidates are in high demand, as you might imagine, in the global workforce at this point. And so making sure that you're really thinking about what all of those sort of more tangible skills are that you might be able to include on the resume. We're not going to build these into this sample version right now, just for kind of simplicity's sake. But keep that in mind. All of these things could be additional sections that we would build in, and all of them would require a bit of space, which takes us back to the question of how do we continue formatting the rest of this to make space for other new information or new experiences. Now, I do want to hit real quickly on references. You'll notice we haven't talked about references so far, and I haven't made any notes down here about references. And that's because nowadays references do not go on your resume. We don't even need to mention references. It is assumed nowadays by employers that you will provide references when they ask, because, I mean, if you don't, they just probably won't consider you for the job, right? So you have an impetus, you have a motivation to keep a list of references that you can then provide. Now, one other reason that we wouldn't include this on this base resume is for your own privacy and your own knowledge and communication about a particular hiring process. If an employer asks you for references, that's typically a pretty good sign. It means that they're interested enough, whether that's just based on your resume or maybe you've done a phone interview or even an in-person interview with an organization, and they like you enough, probably in addition to a couple other candidates, that they're going to now focus on just you. They're not going to call everybody's references, all 30 people that applied for that job. They're not going to call all their references, but they might want to call your references and one or two other candidates. So they're going to ask you for those references. You want to have those references handy and ready to go quickly so that you don't delay their process in terms of talking to your references at all. So the next question, how do we build a reference sheet? Well, one thing we're going to do is we're going to make a new page. We could just make it on a separate page on this document. We could also make this on a page on a whole separate document. But what I'm going to do in this case is I have another pre-set up reference page over here. This is actually Matt Jack's references. But we want to build this reference page, and then we'll get to the formatting in a second. But the first thing to note about this page is that we still have the header with contact information right up top. Here, whereas we have education section and work experience section, on the reference sheet, we only have one section, and that is references, right? So just the one reference. And then we want to list at least 3 references. I typically wouldn't recommend listing any more than 5. I mean, unless you're specifically asked to, but 3 is a pretty standard minimum number to be able to provide a reasonable list of references to a potential employer. So in this case, I've got a reference list made up. You can see we've got the person's name, we've got the person's title, we've got the university they worked at, their phone number, and their email address. This is largely the information we would want to provide for any reference. In some cases, if there aren't, especially if there isn't a clear connection between you and that reference, then you might want to add a note about their relationship to you. So, for example, let's say that you did an internship in the University Public Relations Office, and Dr. Alfred Packer was your reference. So we might add a quick line, former internship supervisor. Right. So just one extra line of context to let the employer know not only what their title is. Now, in this case, this person has retired, but we want them to also know, how is it related to you? How do you know them? This isn't just some person at the university that you met in the grocery store. This is a person that you had a real relationship. And so this is going to help the employer to understand what kinds of questions they might be able to ask to get to know more about you. Okay. So, and then we've got three, as I mentioned, three references down here. Now, one of the kickers here is we want these to look the same. We want these pages to have the same feel to them so that they feel like a single document, even though these are two separate documents, but they're going to feel like a single packet of information for the potential employer. So the first thing is, let's just update this information, first of all, to match my information. Now, the easiest way, if I like this heading up here, the way that this looks and everything, and I'm actually not sure that I do. I feel like this name needs to be a little bit bigger to really distinguish it from these other section headings. Okay, that feels better. And now we can literally just copy this, bring this over here, and paste it in here. So we want the exact same heading. Similarly, we want similar formatting. Now, this is education. This section over here is called references. So, but we want the same basic formatting, and we could even just highlight and grab the format painter. Oh, and it didn't get all of it. Okay, well, let's do this the hard way. And we want all of this in, I believe this was, what was it, 16 type? Yeah. And we also notice this is just only capitalizing the first letter. Over here is all caps. So make sure that looks the same. Now, I've also got what looks like an underline over here, and I don't have that over here. If you like the look of this underline, then we can add it to this document. If you don't like it, we can take it out of this document. Let's just see what it looks like, because you have options. Now, the key here is this is not just a line that I've drawn on the page. This is actually an underline, just like you might underline a cell in Microsoft Excel to emphasize that cell. We can actually underline the exact same way by just putting our cursor on this line and then using this little guy, this borders function right here. And we want a bottom border, click it. There you go, bottom border. If we're going to do it for this heading, we want to do the same thing for this heading. So again, bottom border. Great. And now we're starting to look pretty similar. Now we've still got this text is still in Times New Roman. This is in Calibri size 12. This is Times New Roman size 12. So it looks like we can just grab all of this, change this to Calibri, and suddenly we have got a document that matches in terms of the format, matches your resume nicely. So we have a nice consistency of experience. Now, remember that these whole things, I mean, we can change all of this just en masse. We can just see what, we can just see what things look like and try them out. Maybe we want to see what this all looks like in Times New Roman, right? So select all and Times New Roman, and we can give this a look. Maybe you prefer Times New Roman. Maybe you prefer Calibri. Either way, you get to make that decision. But we want that consistency between these two documents to make it very easy to locate. Okay. And, I forgot to add a final contact slide. But so this is where we're going to go with a resume now. Now we've got, perhaps still not a finished resume over here with the one, with the resume that we've just built, right? Maybe this isn't totally done. We can certainly still continue to do some tweaking, but now you've got a very basic format that gives you a template for the rest of your resume and how to build the rest of it. Now, eventually, I'm going to pull this back over here. And eventually what we might want to do is we might want to get something a little more sort of finely tuned, kind of like Mad Jack's resume over here, which, as you can see, just has some more jobs. We've got a section for leadership and community engagement, certification, skills. We've got some additional information over here. We use these underlines and all caps in these heading sections to help them stand out a bit. And what we can start to do then is you find other resume formats that maybe look cleaner, look easier to read, or you just prefer for whatever reason. You can start to tweak your resume over here to do it. For example, one notable difference on Mad Jack's resume is that we don't just use the left margin over here to align all of our text like we do back on this resume on the left. We actually use the right margin too. We're not going to go into this trick today. This is using something called tab stops. But this helps us simplify things. Instead of taking up 4 lines for all of this information over here, you'll notice that now we only have to take up 2 lines, because now we can put our employer name, city and state, the date of employment or dates, and the job title. And these all now fit on 2 lines of a page, which is going to give you more space down here to add other content. So we have lots of things that we can continue to do to tweak and continue building this, the document. But at this point, for the purposes of these basic resume building videos, I would say, I wouldn't worry too much about this until you get really comfortable with the basic content and the basic formatting that you've built into your resume. Once you kind of like this basically, then we can go back and talk about this and figure out how to use space more wisely. One note before we end this video about using space wisely is we can see one notable difference on this resume over here is that we have everything is left aligned against this left margin. And so we're left with kind of a bunch of white space over here on the right of the page, right? And then obviously we haven't quite filled the page. So we have a bunch of white space down here. By using both sides, both margins, the left and right margin over here in this document, you can see that we sort of more successfully kind of balance the page out by putting content on the left and the right side of the page. We still have white space to break up some of these sections a little bit and all of that, but not as much white space sort of imbalanced over here on the right. It's a little bit more balanced now just because we filled in a bunch of this extra space over here. So that's just one example as we start to get into kind of the next phase of fine-tuning a resume that you might be interested in. And feel free to look up, tab stops. You can Google it and probably learn from 100 videos how to do this. Or if you make an appointment with Career Services, we can certainly talk about how to set some of this stuff up in your resume. So though I obviously forgot to include contact information over here on this PowerPoint, well, let's see. Let's go back to the beginning. How about? And there is my information. Career Services is located in Library 120. That's on the first floor or the garden level of the library, not on the main floor that is actually the second floor. Here's an email address. You can get a hold of me anytime. You can also self-schedule right in Handshake. If you just go log in any available time on my calendar, you can just pop yourself in there to claim a space if you like, or reach out to me. Shoot me an email and we can make an appointment either by Zoom or in person or even by email. I can send you feedback by email on resumes if you would like, and if that's going to be more convenient for your schedule.